Barbara was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic autoimmune disease for which there is currently no known cure. They described her as someone who was one of the most hopelessly ill patients they ever saw, with an even worse prognosis. Barbara would spend months at a time in hospitals. Usually it was because she was suffering from pneumonia after being unable to breathe. Her diaphragm was paralyzed, rendering a lung completely non-functional. The other lung operated at less than 5%, and a tube was inserted into her back, which pumped oxygen from canisters into her body. She was legally blind, unable to read, and only capable of seeing objects as these obscure dark gray shadows. Her doctor recalls her abdomen being so grotesquely swollen because the muscles of her intestines didn't work. And Barbara had been unable to walk for over 7 years. She was confined to bed, her body twisted like a pretzel into this permanent fetal position. The doctors explained to her family that it was just a matter of time, and they agreed to place a do not resuscitate order for when the time would inevitably arrive. And Barbara would eventually enter hospice care in her home, at that point being given a life expectancy of less than 6 months. Now one day, a prayer request was submitted to the radio station of the Moody Bible Institute out in Chicago, and some 450 Christians ended up writing letters to Barbara's church, telling them that they were lifting Barbara up in prayer. Later that week, during a home visit, Barbara's aunt and 2 of her friends would bring 2 of these letters where people offered their prayers for healing, and they would read these letters to Barbara as comfort and encouragement. And that day, during a lull in their conversation, Barbara recalled hearing a man's voice from behind her. And of course, at first she found this extremely odd, given there was no one else in the room aside from her aunt and her friends. Barbara recalls vividly, "My child," she heard, "get up and walk." Now, of course, hearing this, Barbara grew excited, and one of her friends noticed her excitement. And Barbara told them, "God just told me to get up and walk." Barbara did what she felt was divinely instructed. She jumped out of her bed and she removed her oxygen canister. And suddenly, Barbara was standing on legs that had not supported her for years. Her vision was back, and she was no longer short of breath. Her physical contractions were gone, and she was able to move her feet and her hands freely. The next day, Barbara would go into Dr. Marshall's office for an examination, and Dr. Marshall jokingly recalls how he thought he was seeing her ghost as she walked toward him. He would go on to tell Barbara that it was all medically impossible. A chest x-ray showed that her lungs were already perfectly normal. The collapsed lung completely expanded. The intestine that had been vented to the abdominal wall had been reconnected. She was eventually restored to complete health, and Barbara lived over 35 years with no recurrence of her illness.